Before we begin today, there is just a content warning for today's episode. The two X-Files episodes we're going to be discussing today are Excelsis Dei and Aubrey. Both of them do contain both rape and violent assault against women as a plot point. It particularly features a lot into Excelsis Dei because this happens right at the start of the episode. So just be warned, because it happens in the episode, we are going to be discussing it today, and if you're sensitive to that, you might want to just stop listening now. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast. I'm Nick.
And I'm Kim.
And I believe you have some more news for us.
I do, and it is kind of following on from my news from last week, particularly regarding X-Files events for the 30th anniversary that are occurring over in America. Unfortunately, we won't be attending these because we're in the UK. We will be, as a side note, at the event that's happening at the Science Museum in March. That's unfortunately sold out now, but it was a screening of the pilot episode with a Q&A via video link with Chris Carter and some others. We will be at that event because it's happening within the UK, but these events are all happening over in America. So for our American listeners, you might be interested in this. First of all, FileFest, that's File with a PH, we spoke about last week. That's happening in Minnesota at the Mall of America. It's a 3-day event running from September the 8th to September the 10th. We talked about some of the guests they'd announced last week. They've just announced 2 more large ones. So Nicholas Lee, who plays Kryzik, and Annabeth Gish, who's Monica Reyes, will both be attending the event. So if you fancy going to that, just head over to their website for more information. It is filefest.offbrandevents.com. And just once again, that's file spelt Phile. In a similar vein, the X-Files Museum, which is in Saratoga Springs, New York, is also having a 30th anniversary event. This one's called the X-Files Fan Fest. It's on July the 7th of this year. If you're interested, you can just head over to their website to find out more. They have announced some of their guests for it as well. They have also got Annabeth Gish, who's Monica Reyes. They've got William B. Davis, the cigarette-smoking man. They've got Karen Conoval, who features in a number of episodes. Most famously, she's in Clive Bruckman's Final Repose as the psychic who's killed towards the start of the episode. And she's also Mrs. Peacock, the matriarch of the family in Home, which is a very infamous episode of the X-Files. And finally, they've got Christopher Logan, who features as Dr. Sanjay in The Founder's Mutation. If you live, of course, near New York or the Mall of America, probably worth checking those out. They sound particularly good. Anyone would like to send us to either of these events, please let us know.
Anything else for news, or is that everything for this week?
Nope, that's my gossip for this week. As always, if you have anything you want me to promote on the show, just let me know on any of our social media. There'll be more information with where you can find us and how you can contact us at the end of the episode.
Thank you. So we should probably move along to our episode. So as Kim said at the start, content warning for these two, in the fact they are a bit heavy subject matter-wise. But I'll start off on a light note with some of our guest stars and where you might have seen them or heard them before.
Okay.
So, Excelsis Dei is directed by Stephen Jurek and written by Paul Brown. First broadcast on the 16th of December 1994. This would be Paul Brown's second episode after Ascension, and Stephen Surjik's only episode to date. So, guest stars. Terrell Rothery as Michelle Charters. The best I found for things we... well, I don't know if we've actually heard them, but things she got cast in. She is Kadachi Kuno in Ranma Half. That would be Kuno's sister.
Okay.
And she's Eiko Megami in Project Eiko.
All right. Some retro anime there.
Oh, yeah. So she's Kadachi Kuno like for the entire run of the series in dub voices.
Oh, neat.
Which is pretty cool. So we also have Sab Shimono as Gung Bitten, or Bituen, who was in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 as Lord Norinaga. He was in Southland Tales as Hideo Takahashi. For all those 3 people who've seen Southland Tales.
I'm one of them.
I know. Pity the poor other person. He's in The Simpsons as Mr. Sparkle of all things.
Oh, he banishes ghosts to the realm of whatever it is.
Yes, he's disrespectful to dirt.
Yep.
He was in an episode of Seinfeld, and he's 2 different people in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Monk Gyatso and Master Yu.
Oh, okay.
And we have Frances Bay as Dorothy, who we know best as Seinfeld being Mrs. Choate or Marble Rye. But she was also Mabel in a previous episode to that.
Okay.
But she's also in Karate Kid and Karate Kid 3 as Mrs. Milo.
Ah.
She's in Twin Peaks and Twin Peaks Fire Walk With Me. She was Mrs. Tremond in the TV version, and Mrs. Tremond and Mrs. Chalfront in Fire Walk With Me. It's been a while, I can't remember how that works, if that makes any sense.
No, I haven't seen that movie for a long time.
She was, of course, in The Mouth of Madness. She was in The Mouth of Madness.
Yes, brilliant film.
As the proprietor of the hotel. She was in Cheers for one episode. So continuing on that vein, Eric Christmas played Stan Phillips. He was in Cheers and Seinfeld. And last but not least, Tasha Simons played Stan Phillips' daughter, who I don't think got a name. We previously saw her as Cindy Reardon, who was the mother in Eve.
Oh, okay.
And Dr. Grego was also in Tombs as another doctor.
Oh, that's where I'd seen him before. Yeah, I thought he looked familiar. Got him now, yep.
Okay, so Excelsis Day. Scully receives a videotape of Michelle Charter's injuries received during a rape by an invisible entity. Michelle names Hal Arden as her attacker, an elderly resident of the Excelsis Day private nursing home. Hal suffers from Alzheimer's and admits to sexual harassment of Michelle, but claims he is too elderly to have done anything to her. Management at the home believes Michelle has manufactured the incident to extort money from them. During their investigation, Mulder and Scully discover many of the home's Alzheimer's patients have improved, which is not medically possible. The administrative doctor, Dr. Grego, attributes this to experimental drug, which has otherwise negligible effect in studies. Hal Arden abruptly dies. After this, his roommate, Stan Phillips' daughter arrives and tries to move him back home. Stan does not want to leave the nursing home and instead leads an orderly onto the roof before the orderly is swept off his feet by an invisible force, which pries the orderly's fingers away from the edge of the roof before Mulder can save him. Mulder and Scully discover that another orderly, Gung Bitten, is providing the patients with a herbal drug formed from mushrooms cultivated in the basement. Gung explains how different America treats its elderly to his own culture. He is attempting to ease their suffering, but admits something has gone horribly wrong. In his country, the mushrooms are used to talk to the dead. The spirits in the building, however, are restless and angry and attacking the staff. Stan overdoses on Gung's pills and begins seizing. Spirits attack Michelle and flood the room with her and Mulder inside. Scully and Dr. Drago stop Stan's seizures and the spirits vanish. The government of Massachusetts takes over Excelsis Day and Michelle is paid off. Gung is sent to immigration services and all the patients relapse into their previous conditions with Alzheimer's. So neither of us were looking forward to this episode.
No, I was not.
Really, X-Files really went with this.
I am going to start with what I dislike most, is how rape is handled in this episode. It's the opening sting in which we do hear more than see, admittedly, but the rape sequence involving Michelle is absolutely horrible. It's quite prolonged. It mercifully cuts away from the actual act, but we hear her screams kind of echoing down the corridor. And following that, we have the fact that no one believes her, Mulder included, who is completely dismissive about the fact that she might have been raped.
Yes. And what kind of struck me as well, though, is Mulder and Scully are bizarrely on opposite sides on this at first, because Mulder's going with the psychological explanation of why she thinks it's an invisible entity because of the trauma. She's managed to erase the person from her mind. Which is, that's what Scully should be saying.
Yeah, it is like their personalities are switched in this, because Mulder is so skeptical as well, because he says, there have been loads of these accounts of, I think what he calls alien rapes, these invisible entities raping women, and none of them have ever been proven. It's like, but Mulder, none of these things that you investigate have been proven before. No. Why is this one too much of a stretch for you?
And it's also really weird, though, because he's really eager to leave, and Scully keeps saying, we can hang around an extra day, and it's a case of, what happened to you two?
Yeah, it's... I think the true mystery of the episode is where their personality transplant came from.
And that's before we get into the really alarming stuff, like Mulder watches porn at work, for some reason.
This is a throwaway comment in a scene where we're talking about a woman being violently assaulted and raped.
Exactly, and it starts off with whatever tape you found in that machine this morning isn't mine. I put them in the drawer with all the other tapes. But what the hell is going on?
It's absolutely the wrong time for brevity.
Yes.
This statement might have been funny in kind of any other circumstance than this.
Absolutely, and not with she's watching videotape of the injuries because no one believes this poor woman who's been attacked.
I'm going to skim to the end as well, but there's no closure for it either.
No.
We don't know if she gets her resolution or her kind of insurance payout for this, which is what she's going for.
So the government settles out of court.
Oh, the government settles out of court, so she got something at least.
Yeah.
But it's kind of totally brushed this under it, and it's shock value.
Yeah.
It's entirely done for shock value. It's not for this character's personal journey or development or anything else.
No, well, plus the episode can't even commit to this really gross storyline anyway, because the implication is she's been attacked by one of the patients, and Hal Arden is unequivocally the guilty party.
He never denies it either.
No, well, he denies it to Mulder and Scully, but he says he admits it to Stan.
Mm.
So he harasses her at the start when she's sort of taping him into bed.
Yeah.
And then he denies it when Mulder and Scully ask, and then Stan saying...
No, he doesn't deny it. He just says, look at me, I'm old. How could I do it?
That's true. But then when he talks to Stan afterwards, it's a case of, you've got to be more careful, you could get caught. And he just brushes it all off.
So from that moment on, we're supposed to think it's some kind of astral projection, I guess.
Yeah. And, okay, that's... Okay, it's terrible, but this is the old plot line is this drug is giving these patients sort of weird supernatural powers. Fine. Then Gung says, oh no, we've woken the spirits in the building. The spirits are attacking the people, and that's what the Wikipedia's gone with, because that's the explanation for Michelle and Mulder in the room at the end. Okay, but that's not how you started this.
It also kind of explains Dorothea, because rather than attacking people, Dorothea keeps saying that she sees people.
Yeah, that's not what you started with. And then you've got the other guy who's the artist who's just painting really well, and he didn't seem to be harming anyone. So
No, he more so seems to just show the fact that this is doing something to help their Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
Because they said when he came, he used to be an artist. When he came there, he couldn't draw a circle. Now he can draw these beautiful things again. At the end of the episode, we see he's regressed and he can't draw again.
Yeah, he can just sort of draw very simplistic Charles-like drawing.
So he's the easy way to show you how this drug is affecting people through his kind of faculties.
Yeah. But again, we sort of... I think it's going to be good to keep saying about the X-Files, and I imagine we're going to see it right at the end of the series, is it doesn't seem to be able to commit to its premises half the time. It's obviously something cool, and then halfway through we'll say, no, we're doing something else.
I'm not going to say anything in this episode is cool, to be honest, but...
I mean, well, other examples are cool, and then we've sort of changed halfway through. This one is a case of we saw something gross, and we tried to walk it back.
I suppose, again, Firewalker is your other case point for this, where we start with the shadows and there is something living in the depths of this volcano, and then the solution kind of changes halfway through the episode, and the opening sting is essentially a misdirect.
Yeah, and it's like this one was almost, we started with a gross premise, and someone got cold feet, but we'd filmed half of it, and now we're going to try and claw that back as best we can at the last second.
The only kind of interesting thing you get really later on is that special effects sequence in the water tank, where Mulder and Michelle are trapped in a room which inexplicably fills with water. I'm not sure why this room is so well sealed, apparently.
It's supernatural influence. We're going to have to give the whole sort of the ghosts actually...
But it's a cool practical effect, which must have cost them a lot to do at the time. I mean, safety considerations alone, with 2 actors in this tank of filling water.
Even if you take the premise of, first it's elderly patients get supernatural powers and use them for the worst possible purpose, or at least one of them does, and then everyone else is knowingly complicit and doesn't say anything.
Which is probably the more sensible answer as well, because you've got the idea of these people who power has been taken away from them and they're being quite abused by the orderlies.
Yeah.
And therefore they can use this as a modicum of revenge.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that in a second. So that's how we started, and then the end is we've woken the angry ghost in the building, which I can get where that's coming from.
Again, they're being mistreated, so presumably if they've died in that building, you've got the restless dead there.
Yeah. Where it falls apart a bit, though, is why is Stan the focal point of this? Why does stopping his seizures get rid of the ghosts?
When
it's all of them.
I think Gunn gives a number, but there's like at least half a dozen of them taking this drug.
Yeah, and he's overdosed, sure, but then it would make sense if he was the one causing the ghost that then relieve it, giving him the whatever they've done to relieve his seizure stops the ghost appearing. that he's controlling them or something.
I guess on that swing round, you'd have to have that Stan was either taking a bigger dose than the rest, or he was being abused worse than the rest of them, to give it a focus for this angry ghost.
Yeah, and that might explain it. Then you've got things like the orderly who gets run off the roof, which is also feels like petty revenge from Stan.
There's the other orderly that's killed in Gung's basement
and we
as
don't know
well.
who did that.
We don't know who did it or how, even.
No, and why someone thought to bury them in a mushroom patch. And that's a deep mushroom patch to take an entire body.
It largely mentions, I think, that he just didn't turn up for work one day and then they find him much later in the episode, just to put suspicion on Gung.
Yeah. Anyway, so go back to the point, though, it's the elderly being mistreated. So there's the kernel of what the episode should be about is, and Gung especially says it, is Malaysia treats the elderly very different to how America does. America sends them into nursing homes, doesn't want to have anything to do with them.
It's quite a social commentary.
Yeah. And you get Stan Phillips' daughter a bit of why that happens. It's not so much not caring in every case, it's simply a case of affordability and time. And she couldn't commit to that.
You've got a little bit of not caring, because she mentions things like Stan's grandkids won't visit him because they think it's scary.
Yeah.
So you've got this idea of being kind of elderly and infirm as being something that's frightening and that you don't want to look at.
True, but you don't know if that's Stan or that's everyone else in the home. And again, it comes back to she's been forced into this position because of how her life was going up to that point, rather than wanting to rush them under the carpet. But we can say everyone else is probably there because no one else wanted to care for them.
I think they mentioned something like Arden never gets any visitors or something like that.
Yeah, and they also mentioned that the whole place is chronically underfunded because no one's funding it. And that's why you've got terrible orderlies who are being underpaid and don't care either.
They are varying degrees of awful, these orderlies. Michelle's not especially nice, but she's probably the nicest of a bad bunch.
Which then again, you've got, that again comes back to the whole, what is the ghost's problem? Because yes, she's not great, but the other two are worse, and then she's the first one attacked, and that makes sense again if it's Hal Arden doing it, but not if it's the spirits in the building who are doing it.
You feel more like she should be Arden's fixation because he makes obscene comments to her. And it's her bedside manner, though I'm not really sure how you can respond to these in a nice way, is she's quite brusque and standoffish with him.
True, but I think you'd have to be, wouldn't you? Because
Yeah.
in this case, you can't encourage them.
Again, you could say that the best argument I can think of as why she's targeted is she's got a poor bedside manner and she doesn't respond well to his gross comments towards her. But she's clearly a better orderly than the two gentlemen, because it's in that early scene where she goes and says, oh, somebody passed away today, has anyone stripped the room? And they both say, no, we saved it for you.
Yeah.
They're a degree worse than she is again.
Exactly. So, vengeful ghosts in the building, go for them. Leave the person who's actually trying her hardest in a job she hates, because that's all been a running theme where she's constantly tried to quit and hasn't been able to.
I think it also infers the fact that she's made some claims against them before for stress and things like that.
Yeah.
That haven't been paid out, which is why no one believes her rape claim now.
Again, assuming that Hal actually did attack Michelle, Stan knows absolutely what he's done and isn't going to even try and stop him, just, you're going to get us caught.
He's more worried about them cutting off their drug supply than the fact that his roommate has raped a woman.
Yes. And what? I mean, he does seem to be a fundamentally horrible person, even though his daughter is trying her damnedest.
I guess you've got the basis is maybe a commentary on drug use as well, because I can't think of much worse than developing Alzheimer's.
Yes.
And he's experienced that, and he's now got this relief and he's getting his faculties back. You would be desperate to keep your supply.
Exactly. So I can understand his reluctance to then leave again,
knowing the fact that he's going to deteriorate if he does. It's something that would be a lot sadder if they were nice characters.
Yes.
Which is one of my big problems with the episode is it's clearly geared that you feel sorry for these elderly people, and barring a few exceptions, you don't.
Yeah, I mean, Dorothy and the artist, I think you have sympathies for them in the final shots.
Yeah.
Stan, no.
And Arden, definitely no.
But he's very dead at that point.
Thank goodness.
The addiction theme is also a weird one to splice on top of this, because they are constantly going, we need more, and Gunning is constantly saying, no, you've got enough. What are we doing with this? Addiction to your Alzheimer's relieving thing? Is the mushroom stuff addictive in itself?
You get the impression that it works better on some people than others, because that's why Leo and Dorothea think they need more, because they're not having the same effects it's having on Stan and Arden.
Yeah, although, again, then we get into the weird one of only Arden actually exhibits this kind of astral projection thing. No one else seems to be, unless Stan swept that oddly off the roof.
It infers he might have done, but
That's
it's
when we get-
decidedly unclear.
That's when we get into real confusion in the second half of the episode.
The orderly does go over the roof when he's chasing Stan, who is remarkably sprightly and zips over that rooftop.
Yes, and it's also that three-story house where that guy falls for like 30 seconds.
I think they said he fell from the 4th floor or something like
He
that.
still falls an awfully long
He falls an
way.
awfully long time and he lands on grass, so you think if it was 4 floors high, he probably wouldn't die instantly the way he did in that episode. Especially as he would have been falling feet first as well, right? Because he's clinging to the roof.
Yeah, you'd think so.
Mind you, Scully was first on the scene, so maybe it was her first aid.
Scully's first aid strikes again.
I will note she's first on the scene when Arden chokes to death as well and doesn't do anything to try and stop him from choking.
She does do chest compressions. You did know that at the time.
But he's choking.
He is choking, that's
which
true.
means the airway is blocked, which means chest compressions aren't going to do a lot.
No, it's true. Again, we've got this weird thing where Mulder's all fine to sort of go home again, and Scully's very much goes, no, let's hang on an extra day. There's definitely something here, Mulder. What, Scully? What? The Alzheimer's thing is kind of interesting from a science thing, but leave that to the doctor doing the study.
Yeah.
Even though it turns out that basically it's not doing what he thought it was doing.
I guess from the outside and not knowing about the mushroom, he must have thought it was his drugs that were doing this.
Yeah, although they do usually point out that basically every other instance of this has shown negligible, if any, results, and so he should be a lot more suspicious that there's something else going on.
Or a lot more interested.
Or a lot more interested. He just seems remarkably hands-off, doesn't he?
You think that if every other trial of this drug has failed and this one's working, you'd be wanting to look into the variables and find out why.
Exactly. And
what have I done different this time?
And he's like there, like, what? He's not even permanently on staff, is he? He sort of visits them once a week or something, doesn't he?
It does appear that way, yeah. I mean, Leo alone should be your argument for why this doctor should be interested, because the way Leo's art skill changes through the episode is staggering.
Yes, when he draws the enormous mural on the wall.
Well, you've gone from him apparently being unable to draw anymore, to him drawing these amazing abstract illustrations in charcoal, to him completely illustrating this kind of, Erominous Bosch hellscape up the wall of the room.
I say that's another bit, is it feels like a lost opportunity, and I know later episodes will do things like that kind of artwork, but surely that artwork should have contained visible people in the hotel or something, or like, if it's meant to be the restless spirits, have Hal Arden very obviously in the mural or something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then that comes down to our confusion about what's happening, because we're reversing the Alzheimer's, sure, but with Leo, the implication is he's doing more than he did before. So he's drawing this enormous mural that he wouldn't even be capable of as a...
It's not just that he's regained his art skill, he's become even better.
Yeah, and it's the whole, we've got that, but then it's actually just angry ghosts, and we're going to just shuffle the art thing off to the side like everything else.
It's either, I guess, you'd want to see things you recognised in that mural, or you'd want some kind of clue. Something that Mulder could look at and think, actually, yeah, that's what's going on here, I can see it in the art.
Yeah, and there isn't anything, it just feels to be incidental. It's slightly creepy, like if someone was drawing a hellscape, but only if you sort of squint and are really digging at it. Otherwise, it's just the impressiveness is what they're focusing on.
The just sheer scale of it, because it covers a wall and most of the ceiling.
Yeah, and I just feel we should actually have a bit more to do with that. I did find it interesting as well that when they eventually sort of find the mushrooms and talk to Gung and everything, the episode is weirdly evasive on where he's come from. It's not until the Scully's ending narration you find out it's Malaysia.
I did notice that. He says, I don't think he actually says Malaysia himself. He says things like, oh,
My country.
my home country and things like that.
And apparently also is incorrect because he says prefecture and that's not how Malaysia does it. They do districts.
Ah.
So that's just a factual error in there as well.
It's kind of a frustrating one. You feel they could have resolved that quite easy.
I did also notice as well, after we get to this point, when basically the wheels on the episode have more or less fallen off, and Scully apparently is just not actually concerned with the rape case at all. Which is quite startling, really, given that she was the one who got us into this point.
Purely because she believed in the woman.
Yeah, and now that's just... Now, Michelle might be making it up, doesn't matter, but we've got this weird Alzheimer's testing going on. Can someone write Scully consistently in this episode and Mulder? And then we get the episode just kind of blows up for no reason, and it seems to be Stan's overdose that's done it. But again, it comes on the back of a whole lot of things, like where they find that Gung's supply of pills is gone. Leo gets dragged away into the darkness and presumably killed by the spirits of the
He's
building.
not killed. He's back at the end of the episode.
Okay, Leo's dragged away, though, by the vengeful spirits of the building.
Got to assume so, yeah.
Who are angry at the orderlies.
Maybe you've got to that point of messing with the supernatural that they're just mad at everyone by this stage.
Or maybe they just seem to just be annoying Dorothy, though. I don't seem to actually do anything to her, and Stan is fine the entire time.
I don't think you even find out if Stan sees the Restless Dead. It's mainly Dorothy. Dorothy.
And then we also have, and I do realise it's kind of a nuance point, but no one goes after the admin. The lady in charge of the whole project, none of the ghosts come for her.
Yeah. She's a very hands-off admin. I get the impression is she genuinely believes there isn't any abuse going on, because why would you abuse the elderly? But she doesn't really care.
No, and it should be... It feels odd that is also manages to escape any kind of revenge by these spirits that are apparently that furious.
You think if you're that furious, you'd be going for this person who's just kind of not ignoring it, not concerning herself with it happening.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, it's a nuanced thing of can you accept that it's a systemic issue where, yeah, the orderlies are part of it, but they're not the primary cause. It's the entire system as a whole, so everyone within it is culpable.
It's the fact the roots are dying, so therefore it's affecting the entire tree.
Yeah, and the ghosts don't seem to understand that either, but then again, we don't understand what the ghosts want.
There's nothing to say. I'm thinking of this in the kind of Ju-on sense of the house is angry at us, is thinking of Excelsis Dei itself as an entity it might not understand.
It might not.
It's just that culmination of rage that's suddenly exploded.
Yeah. So we need a better trigger for that happening, though, than Stan having a seizure.
Because he's eaten too many mushrooms.
Yeah. Yeah, we cure Stan and the ghosts vanish and the bathroom unseals and splashes water everywhere. And that's it. And Dorothy's happy. But then everyone is off their medication. And so Alzheimer's reverts. And
very quickly as well.
Very quickly. And for Leo and Dorothy, it's a very bleak ending. For Stan, you're a complete bastard.
It's like I said earlier, is I get the impression from the way that ending's framed is we're supposed to feel sad.
Yeah, and you can feel sad for Leo and Dorothy, or more so for Leo, who, was flourishing under this drug. Dorothy is a weird one where she just kind of was there.
You got the impression it was never working as well for Dorothy either, because
No.
she was a bit scatty even when she was taking the drug.
Yeah, you could have it so, like, Stan was only just starting to succumb to Alzheimer's, and, like, Leo was middling and Dorothy was really far gone. And getting her back up to her mental faculties was taking longer.
Yeah, it could be that. But it was inferred that Stan was very far gone.
Yeah.
Because his daughter says something like when they took him to the hospital, they didn't think he was going to live very long.
No.
And this is 3 years later.
Yeah. But yeah, so you can feel sorry for 2 of the 3 surviving characters. You can't feel sorry for Stan, who is culpable and stood by and then actually caused the problem, as far as we can see.
The ending conflicts me so badly for this one, because it's, oh no, Stan's reverted to the way he was before. Good, he can't hurt anyone else. Let's get on with it.
Well, I think the other problem is that the way the episode actually depicts everything is that had Gung just distributed the pills on his own schedule as whatever he was doing, however often he was giving them to them, the episode wouldn't have happened. Is the implication.
Can I question those drugs as well? Because we get very confused as to what they're for, because Gung's story...
Oh, yes, that's true.
Gung's initial story begins with him saying that they are supposed...
They ease their suffering.
Gung's original story is, that they will ease the suffering. This kind of then moves on to, actually, it's a drug we use to speak to the dead. It's like, does it do 2 things, or have we just forgotten that we said it did the first thing first?
Apparently, and then the start of the episode, though, still insinuates it gives you telekinetic or astral projection powers. So it does 3 things simultaneously, depending on who you are.
The telekinesis could be because they've all OD'd on it.
Yeah.
That's the whole, it makes you better, going to the extreme of it gives you superpowers, because they've taken too much of it. But it also allows us to communicate with the dead. Wait, what was that last part?
But none of you communicate with the dead except for Dorothy, who just keeps telling everyone, the dead, to get away from people. Because not Leo, not Hal, not Stan are shown talking to any of the ghosts.
At that stage as well, it doesn't really seem like the dead are actually harming anyone because they're just crowding people, and Dorothy can see that, and she's saying, get away, and that's about it.
Except for dragging Leo into a locked room, which they...
But that's much later.
Yeah. That's when it goes
after we've seen Dorothy saying that she can see these people.
But again, what the ghosts do, because they drag Leo away and apparently do nothing. They just do it for shock value.
They've been a bit bored. I want to question it. Fair enough, it's an old facility and it is a kind of hospice-ish facility as well. But there are a lot of dead people in there. Has nobody looked into this previously?
Are they not?
If you're having a lot of people dying, so literally the ghosts are clogging the hallways in this place.
Well, also, it's so labyrinthian. You can have this locked mushroom room down in the basement, which no one has looked at and actually paid any attention to.
Nobody's ever had to relight the pilot or anything like that, apparently.
Yeah, or just fumigated the building. I know, again, this is probably the social commentary the episode is trying to be.
That it's such an unfunded, neglected building.
Yeah, but the whole focus of the episode shoots past that so far, you've actually failed to really make the point you are, which is elderly care in America is awful, and other places do it better. And somehow you marry Excelsis Dei out of this.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah.
I think it is a running theme in this season and last season is if the government doesn't understand something, it will just destroy it. Because they wipe out the mushroom crop without testing it.
Yeah.
Because surely there's some interesting things going on with whatever these mushrooms were doing, but nope, we're just going to wipe it out.
They're quite benign, the mushrooms, comparatively as well. I can understand wiping out, the parasite in Darkness Falls because it could cause trouble.
Or sealing off the mountain in Firewalker and raising the forest and bombing the facility in ice.
Yeah, because these are all things that if they got out, they could very quickly become virulent and dangerous. What's that mushroom going to do, really?
Well, grow in damp places, obviously.
Yeah, but it's not like it's giving off hallucinogenic spores or anything dangerous like that. And it's evidently not that toxic because you can eat it in small amounts.
Yeah, and they're perfectly fine and they're doing better than they have been. So, yeah, and I mean, are we meant to take this in conjecturing why there's no evidence of aliens anywhere, as the government is just vaporizing stuff? Because that does tie into Deep Throat's story, yes. That any alien life form taken alive must then be destroyed.
This is becoming a much larger commentary on America, I feel.
Yeah, and I'm wondering how intentional that is.
That whenever we see anything we can't explain, we just drop a bomb on it, apparently.
Yes. And so we are getting into the whole the government cover-ups, how it deals with these things, and how much does extra play out? I mean, so could we then guess that if Toombs had managed to survive, would they in fact have nuked him?
Or he'd be like the poor guy in Ghost in the Machine of he's spirited away and we don't see him again.
Yeah, but it's a double bluff with involving more of these cases, in that Mulder will get these entities killed. Like, had Mulder not intervened, they'd have to send a government squad in to kill Toombs and kill the Fluke Man and things. But because Mulder's involved, no, he's going to do it for us. Oh, that crazy Mulder, he's taken out another supernatural entity.
He'll either take out the supernatural entity or deliver it into our hands, and this is easy. We don't have to expend a full squad. Because
again, this is kind of, and I don't think this is what they were intending, but this is kind of what Toombs was inferring with Cancerman looking at the report and Skinner saying, do you believe him? And him responding, of course I do. That's about Toombs, of all things. I'd love to give them the benefit of the doubt, but I don't think I can, because this episode is such a mess.
Yeah, unfortunately, in terms of structure and plotting, this is
quite
low tier. Oh, and the awful, awful subject matter.
If about the horrible horrors of elderly care in America, and this sounds like a Gotham Rangy plot. It's a case of, so what I'm saying is, if you mistreat elderly people in a hospice where loads of people died over years, could you, in fact, open the gates of hell?
Yeah, I think you've written Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
That is a Garth Marenghi novel. Do you have anything else for this episode? Should we hastily move on to something else?
Yeah, I think you've got all my notes.
So, we also watched Aubrey, directed by Rob Bowman and written by Sarah B. Charno, broadcast on the 6th of January 1995. Guest stars Deborah Strang as Inspector B.J. Morrow, who was in Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
Far bigger would be Terry O'Quinn as Lieutenant Brian Tillman, who was in The Rocketeer as Howard Hughes.
Okay.
He's an Amityville A New Generation.
Yeah.
He's twice more in the X-Files. He gets to be in the first film, Fight the Future, as Darius Mashard for his 2 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, it's not long.
It's not long. And then he'll turn up in Series 9 as the Shadow Man in Trust Number 1.
Oh, yep. Yep. Got him.
He was in Star Trek Next Generation. He is a regular on Millennium. And he's also in Harsh Realm. And, of course, his biggest role, really, is as John Locke in Lost, or the Man in Black, which I think he's taken on John Locke's form. But also, interestingly, we have Morgan Woodward, who played Harry Coakley, who was on the original Star Trek twice.
Oh, okay.
In the 60s. And he's also in Millennium for his final role as Iron Lung Man. So I think you can guess what situation he's in. And he did seem to get typecast in his later years, apparently.
I'm just more amazed that apparently these sort of Chris Cartery series all have the same naming conventions of Iron Lung Man, to go with the Crew Cut Man and the Cigarette Smoking Man.
Would you like to give us a synopsis for Aubrey?
Certainly. The episode this time takes its name from its setting, which is the town of Aubrey, which is in Holt County, Missouri. In our opening sting of the episode, we see a local detective who's called Betty June, or BJ Morrill, who bursts into her lieutenant, Brian Tillman's office, to tell him that she has gotten pregnant from the affair that the two of them have been having. This is something that Tillman does not want to hear, especially as he's in the middle of researching a violent murder that has just taken place. He requests that she meets him at a motel later last night so they can discuss it, but while she's waiting for him, BJ has a vision that leads her into this field. There she digs up the skeletal remains of somebody who has evidently died quite some time ago. Mulder and Scully both head to Aubrey to investigate because the skeletal remains are identified as belonging to an agent called Sam Chaney. He disappeared in the area along with his partner, who was Tim Ledbetter, in 1942. The agents are both quite suspicious of BJ's story of how she came to find the remains. However, Tillman is quick to come to her defense. We learn about the investigation that Chaney and Ledbetter were investigating. It involved the rape and murder of 3 women, each of which were found with the word sister slashed into their chests and the same word written above them in blood. Scully, as she is looking over the remains of Chaney, discovers similar cuts on his chest. He's been slashed so hard that it's actually dug into his ribs. They can't quite figure out what the cuts spell out, if anything, though, because it is not the word sister when they analyse it. However, BJ looks over the corpse and instinctively seems to know that the cuts spell out the word brother, which the computer analyses and says is correct. BJ then admits about her affair and pregnancy to Scully, who kind of figures this out on her own. Tillman breaks into the office while they are investigating the corpse and accuses BJ of stealing files about the recent murders that he's been investigating, because all of these also involve the word sister being slashed in the chest of a victim. He's very surprised to discover that these case files that BJ has are actually 40-odd years old. BJ admits to her oddly prophetic dreams, saying that she's seen a man who has a rash across his face and a weird monument in a picture. Mulder quickly identifies when BJ sketches out this picture for him that it's Trilon and Perisphere, which is a very famous monument that was at the 1939 New York World's Fair. BJ searches through old mugshots from the Chaney case and identifies the man from her dream as someone called Harry Coakley. He was arrested in 1945 for raping a woman named Linda Thibodeau. He slashed the word sister in her chest, but she did survive. Scully believes that BJ has somehow unconsciously recalled the case, having probably heard about it in the past as her father was a cop. Both the agents visit Coakley, who is now been released from prison and is terribly old. He lives alone and insists he was at home when the latest murder occurred, and indeed it's quite unlikely that he could have performed it, as he is seriously ill and needs an oxygen tank to move any significant distance. That night, BJ wakes up after a nightmare and finds herself covered in blood. The word sister has been slashed into her chest. When she's looking at herself in the mirror, she sees a young Coakley reflected in the mirror behind her, looking exactly as he did in his mugshot from the 40s. Having another vision, BJ finds herself in the basement of a stranger tearing away the floorboards. Underneath, she finds a skeleton which is later identified as Agent Ledbetter. It's revealed that Coakley stayed in this house around the time that Ledbetter would have disappeared, and he is arrested, but he denies attacking BJ, insisting that his age and medical conditions would have made this physically impossible for him. The two agents then visit Thibodeau in her house, where she graphically describes her encounter with Coakley in the 1940s. On looking around her house, Mulder also notices a photo hanging in the stairwell, which is of the 1939 World's Fair. When pressed on it, Thibodeau reveals that the rape did result in a child, but she could not take the emotional strain of caring for the child and therefore put them up for adoption. Mulder and Scully track down the child, who turns out to have been the cop who was BJ's father. This causes Mulder to surmise that perhaps BJ could be the killer, operating on genetic memories, which apparently have a tendency to skip a generation. As the agents head out to intercept BJ before she can commit any more crimes, BJ attacks Thibodeau, but stops when she sees the sister scars in her chest, comparing them to her own injuries. The agents find Thibodeau after BJ has left, and thus head on to Coakley's house, believing that he must be the next target. BJ has gotten there first and slashed through the tubes on Coakley's respirator before attacking him with a razor. As Mulder investigates the house, he finds Coakley injured and close to death, but is attacked by BJ, who threatens to slit his throat with a razor. At this point, Scully and Tillman both compel her to stop, and BJ finally surrenders, but only after Coakley dies and the will to fight seems to have left her. The episode ends with BJ being placed in a female psychiatric ward under suicide watch because she keeps attempting to abort her unborn baby. It's revealed that Tillman has agreed that once the baby is born, he will adopt it.
Thank you. So, well, a much better episode, but there's still some weirdness in here, I think.
Always go straight to the negative. I think, based on the last few episodes we've seen, Aubrey's actually pretty good.
That's okay, fair.
It's a decent little murder mystery, and it does keep you guessing as to what's actually going on right to the end.
I am ashamed.
You should be. Talk about the positive before you absolutely tear it to shreds.
I wasn't going to tear it to shreds. I was going to note a few weird things, but I mean, it's got very good guest stars. I mean, they're all doing their best in this one.
They're all pretty good.
Yeah.
Particularly Tillman.
Yes. It was being the most established of them, and very much a case of, I don't any of this supernatural nonsense in my episode.
He tried so hard for it to have rational explanations.
Sorry, sir, you got it. I mean, admittedly, it is a bit odd that he sort of mistakes. Sorry, I'm going to negative, but a bit odd. He sees the 40-year-old crime scene photos. Says, "Where did you get these?" This case of looking at those. Do they not really look like your other crime scene photos? I know in general, yes, they've got the same bits, but surely the rest of the scene should give it away with a case of that doesn't look like a 90s carpet. It looks like a 40s carpet.
I suppose at the briefest glance, though, he's gone into their office and seen a picture of somebody lying on the ground with sister carved in their chest, whereas the details of the current crime scene haven't been made public. You would jump to that conclusion of she'd stolen some live case files.
Yeah, I do like, though, that he apparently doesn't want it public knowledge, but in the middle of the Cardiff police station does say, let's keep this sister thing out of the papers. One of the things that the episode kind of touches on is the whole prison as a reform aspect and how it doesn't seem to work for a reformation. At least there's no indication that Coakley has been reformed by his experience in prison.
You get the impression of, were it not for the fact that he's very, very ill, he'd probably still be killing people.
Yes, he'd still be behaving exactly as he was. He's only kind of neutralized because everything's too cumbersome for him to do anything.
He gives a really, really vague excuse for why he's reformed him. It's something to the effect of, I was a sick man at the time and I can't remember doing it. It's yeah. It's never actually revealed. He doesn't admit to doing any of the killings. He only admits to attacking Ms. Thibodeau.
Yeah. And it is one of those, I think even Mulder comments on in this case of how on earth did he attack Ms. Thibodeau, carve sister into her chest, and no one connect that to the other murders?
I suppose you could buy it in the event. In this case, it seems very extreme because the modus operandi is quite distinct.
Yeah.
But you'd base it on cases like where they didn't realise that Ted Bundy killed as many people as he did because some of them they just ruled out and said, no, that couldn't possibly be him, and later found out he was responsible for a lot more deaths than they thought.
Yeah, I actually had in mind Zodiac, where it's a succession of blunders in all the cases just led to him walking away from scenes he shouldn't have been able to.
You think it would be harder here as well, because with the case of the Zodiac, they cross state lines and things like that as well, which it was the difficulty of different kind of states passing information to each other. Whereas, as far as I'm aware, all of these either occurred in Aubrey or the surrounding townships.
Yeah, although the specific one I was thinking of was when he killed the taxi driver, and basically the patrol car stopped by to talk to him.
When he was covered in blood.
Yeah, and it's a case of, he must have been covered in blood, what were you doing? And then that touched on the racism angle, because they thought they were looking for a black suspect. And since he was white, they just said, yeah.
When this could have been our point where the Zodiac could have actually been caught quite easily.
Yes. Just incredible. So I kind of get the sense that might be what they're going for, but it's still, as you said, though, the motive and modus operandi is so specific.
A lot of times when you hear this in the press, that I'm going on basically that I watch a lot of true crime documentaries for this, it's because you have killers who have changed their pattern or something like that. Like the Zodiac did and like Ted Bundy did. So you'd have the whole idea of, we didn't put 2 and 2 together because we were looking for a killer that killed people in a specific way, and then he changed his murder weapon or something like that.
And Coakley absolutely did not.
No, Coakley, the whole carving the word sister into people's chests is quite distinct. It's going to be Coakley or a copycat.
We have a few inexplicable bits, like, I get the sister thing, that you have the really slim justification for why you're doing this and why you think you're blaming all other women. But carving brother into the FBI agent, I'm not sure where you were going with that one.
For the record for the episode as well, is the rationale that is given is that Coakley was from a family that had him and several siblings, and even when he didn't do anything wrong and his sisters did, his father always blamed and beat him for it. So his repeated lines to women are things like, someone's got to take the blame, little sister, and it's not going to be me. And this is just all him regressing to his childhood abuse.
Yeah. But brother?
Yeah, brother makes no sense whatsoever.
I can only imagine it's just basically to throw you off, or... I don't know, as though I think you guys suggested at the time, it's the fact that BJ, we've got to assume BJ is the one doing all the killings in the present.
Mm.
And as you said, though, given the fact that she's second generation and has this tribute, why she's sort of mimicking Coakley's behavior exactly and not sort of flipping it round because she doesn't have that same issue and killing men instead and carving brother, which would then equate it back.
My feeling of the episode, and I'm doing your thing now where I try and rewrite the episode, but is I'd use the genetic memory to turn it more into a retribution story of she's trying to make up for the sins of the father, essentially. Well, the sins of the grandfather in the case of this. But you'd have to kind of rework it a lot of way because there'd be no reason for her to just... The poor woman who dies halfway through the episode, for example, there'd be no reason for her to attack that, continuing the sister motif and all the rest of it. But if she was attacking men that did bad, you could flip it back the other way.
Yeah. I think as well, I mean, I think the episode kind of glosses over it, but you've got to assume that because she's on the police force, that's why she's getting away with doing these murders and hasn't been picked up so far that there's any connection.
I guess they're always reticent to suspect another cop.
Yeah, and also it's the kind of thing of why would their prince be there because they're on the crime scene and all the rest of it, which I think is something that Lazarus actually got into.
Yeah. There was a similar one in one of the... I've been reading those X-Files short story books recently, and one of them worked on the same reference of an FBI agent was framed, and it was the whole question of, is there a logical reason for his fingerprints to be here and things like that. His wallet, I think it was. His wallet was found on a crime scene, and it was the whole, well, could it be because he was investigating or is he the killer sort of mentality to it?
One of the things I was going to say, the affair with the police chief, it's a bit odd why it has to be an affair.
Why it couldn't just be a consensual relationship?
Yeah, why they have to be having an affair. I mean, other than keeping it quiet, but then she's so early in her pregnancy that no one knows and you can't see it. It's a case of why couldn't BJ have her own partner or she just be with the police chief anyway?
With terms of the police chief, I'm not sure about the police force, but I know with things like the FBI, they don't like you to have relationships with your co-workers.
No.
So it could be the idea of that's why it's an affair and that's why they don't want anyone to know about. But it doesn't explain why she couldn't literally have a partner with anyone else.
Exactly. I mean, power dynamics is why you try and not do it in workplace environments, especially if you've got a boss subordinate.
Well, like this,
like that.
he's a lieutenant, she is whatever designation she is, a detective or something like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's just why she did it. And then we get into weird things like the people who have been eclipsed from these episodes for no good reason, like Tillman's wife does not show up on. Well, you see one photo of her, and that's some extent of her involvement in this episode.
Yeah, we've got to assume she's okay with him adopting his love child.
Yeah, and it's whether she knows that's where the child has come from, or it's him being a good Samaritan or something. And
to one of his subordinates.
yeah, there's lots. This is kind of a messed up episode. I do like the intentional how bad the cover up for BJ finding the body is that no one has a coherent explanation of why she was digging in this field
in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, in this case of their justifications for it are just laughable on the surface when they sort of say, "Oh, she followed a dog out to the site or something."
Her visions are really quite vague as well. That's probably the clearest one of the lot of them.
Yeah, I would say that one actually is explicable, though we don't get to see the. Actually, I think her vision of going to Mr. Thibodeau's house is actually the clearest one. We never get to see that. We only get that one described to us.
Yeah, she mentions the picture from the World's Fair and things like that.
I do kind of like how bad an artist she is, because that feels true to, like, we discussed this before, how these people are so good at photo fits. And I feel if you put me down to do a photo fit, I would sort of go, he had eyes, mouth.
Oh, I can't remember how she describes the monument, but Mulder says, "Oh, can you draw it?" And it is literally a triangle with a circle intersecting it.
Yeah.
It's like from that Mulder says, "Oh yeah, that's the 1939 World's Fair," or whatever it is. It's, how?
Presumably, if this is just something he knows about. I mean, the picture, though, when you see it, it's very clear what it is.
Yeah, but would you have got it from someone drawing that on a piece of paper?
Well, I think the problem is it's not part of our culture in the same way, because I don't know if there's a generational thing where they heard a lot about the World's Fair and aspirations for the future.
Think of it comparatively, though, with that World's Fair that was in Tokyo, where the central statue for it, if you have seen it, you will not forget it. It's terrifying. But compared to that, the diamond and the circle.
I was about to say, cannot help think of 20th Century Boys, which
yeah.
is the
other It appears very distinctly in 20th Century Boys, but it's a really, really scary statue.
It is.
And it's very distinct and very stylized, and it's not a triangle next to a circle.
No. Assuming it's going to be something about the New York one.
Yeah.
I can understand why they've done it, but Scully also turns out to be remarkably good at reading people suddenly. Because she has BJ down, like, instantly, doesn't she?
Pregnancy sense, yeah.
And indeed the affair. She has it all mapped out in her head, almost really, and Mulder is oblivious. And you could make two arguments here. It's a case of either this is the writer wanting to make Scully more emotionally aware, or...
It's a female writer writing a female character as well.
Or it's meant to indicate that Mulder is good at this when he's dealing with men, and he's actually really bad at reading women.
I wanted to tie that in further with Scully as well, we've had a few episodes that have involved rape and pregnancy and stuff like that, which is kind of what happened to Scully when she was abducted too.
Very true.
You saw the scene of her kind of stomach being inflated and things like that.
Though it's whether that's actually happening or that Mulder was imagining worst case scenarios.
But if it did happen, you've got this thing that Scully might be recalling subconsciously or something like that, where she is more in tune with pregnant characters, and like we saw in Excelsis Dei, being more personally affected by rape and things like that.
Very true.
Because she's also had a negative encounter like this.
I cannot discount that at all. I can discount the computer magic, though, which I'm going to say, no, your program can't do that. Like the whole, these bones have scratches on them, I'm going to scan them into the computer and reassemble them. Are you?
It's like some kind of puzzle from Myst or something like that.
It is, and it's the case of, but you'll have individual ribs and the size of the carvings, everything. You're going to have, like, just glances across these bones.
Sorry, I'm just trying to work it out on my own rib cage here. Is with the gaps between your ribs and stuff, it's one hell of a jigsaw puzzle.
It is, and like the cross strokes on the S's, if that goes between ribs, you're not going to get that. So to 63% match on brother over sister.
Sister is a really angular word to write as well. I mean, the curves in the B and the O in brother.
Yeah. And again, I was still going back to, why did you feel the need to be our brother other than he's a man? But that doesn't make any sense for why you're claiming you do this.
You could literally carve anything in that guy's chest. None of it has any meaning to Coakley.
What? Or you could literally just kill him and bury him.
Hey, here's an idea.
Because I'm pretty sure it's because he's getting too close that you've done this, so I don't understand the theatrics, other than this is how the episode works. But, I mean, I think the episode does completely gloss over that we have to imagine that BJ is doing the other killings, because there's no way Coakley's doing it in the present. I would just gloss over any kind of awareness she has of doing them. There's no, because the only one we see is where she sort of force flagged herself and carved sister into her own chest in the middle of the night.
Really good penmanship.
Yeah, it's not bad doing it to yourself in reverse.
While asleep.
While asleep, yeah. I just feel the episode is lacking, even concretely, that she did the other killings. Because I think it's an offhand line from Mulder is basically the most you get on that. We have to assume that she is doing the other killings because there's no one else.
By the solution anyway, but it's, for a mystery, it's quite a clever episode in the fact that, based on what we know from previous similar X-Files episodes and things like that, you can think of several different paranormal solutions to this before you get to the genetic memory idea.
That's very true.
Because, I mean, we've already had the ideas of ghosts attacking people in the series and stuff like that. We've had the concept of astral projection for how Coakley could be doing it himself. We've had the idea of possession. We've had people with psychic powers. There are a number of solutions we could get to before it being BJ herself.
But it has made me realise, is one thing the X-Files does very rarely is have Mulder come to the wrong conclusion at first or suggest the wrong solution first. I think Eve is like the big one for the whole, what he thought was happening was not remotely like what's happening.
Aliens.
But generally, it's like Excelsis Dei again is he's jumped immediately to this is a psychological trauma.
Mm.
And in this one, he's basically thinking about clairvoyance and prophetic dreams, which isn't quite what's going on either. But they don't draw on their previous caseload very often, do they?
You think they'd be able to say things like, well, hang on, Scully, there was that ghost that was killing people in Born Again. Or something like
shadows.
That. Yeah.
We've had vengeful ghosts. You might not believe that entirely, Scully, but that case where what was happening there might have some bearing on this one.
Or, you've had that idea of relatives possessing people in Roland.
And indeed Born Again and Lazarus to a point. Scully had a front row seat to Lazarus.
That was more a kind of walk-in, though. That was more like what they were claiming in Red Museum.
It was, but it's still...
It's not really a possession plot in the same way. Roland was something possessing someone else. Or psychically controlling them, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is one of the X-Files' overall problems of we're getting to the whole Mulder is usually right, no matter what he says. Even if it's completely contradictory to everything else.
It amused me having the guy who played Locke in this episode as well, when you've got the actual John Locke's philosophy is the concept of the tabula rasa, or the we're born as a blank slate, which is kind of interesting when you've got a plot about...
He's not, or they're not.
In this, you don't have the concept of blank slate, you've got the idea that you can inherit at a genetic level the memories of your ancestors.
Yeah, I just think that's the other thing that is a bit weird, where you case of, okay, well, even if we can accept this genetic memory thing, surely this should be widespread, but it only seems to happen to serial killers.
He uses himself as an example with his sunflower seeds, though, doesn't he? Is my dad likes sunflower seeds and I like sunflower seeds, therefore it's a genetic memory.
And Scully immediately hits back with learned behaviour model. You just ate sunflower seeds because your father ate sunflower seeds.
Which again would be the tabula rasa.
Yeah.
The idea of the tabula rasa as your other counterpoint is the fact that you were born as a blank slate and the experiences you've had in your life have written on that slate, which is what's made you.
Yes, and that makes a lot more sense to me, genetic memories. I looked at Coakley's previous sort of guest star record in terms of, not just things we've seen him in, other things he's done.
The young Coakley or the old Coakley?
The old Coakley. But he's a very good seedy person. I mean, if he hadn't passed away, you'd do a kind of the whole, he's the aging mafiosa kind of guy, isn't he?
Yeah, he does have that I made him an offer he can't refuse sort of.
There's something, how they've made him up or how he plays it, it's something very sinister, the whole, you've written off this elderly man, but he's still quite dangerous. I think that's part of how they've done it, is they've made it, if he didn't have the oxygen cylinder, you'd actually still view him as a threat.
Yeah.
But it's because he's encumbered by this breathing difficulty that he's neutralized.
Yeah. You certainly get from the way he talks and the way he's a character who doesn't really deny anything.
No, he just sort of says, I don't remember.
Which is a weak defense to have. But he seems like, in his prime, he would have been someone quite physically powerful and intimidating, and he's certainly very skeezy.
Yes, exudes skeeziness somehow.
It's a good piece of casting, to be fair. To have a character that's seems weak, but is also very intimidating.
There's some things which I think have been compressed just for time, and you have to do it in TV to a point. Like where BJ's broken into this random person's house to find the other body and the razor.
It's quite jarring, that scene, to be fair.
It is really jarring.
She's in her own house and then suddenly she's in someone else's basement.
And it takes a while to actually address that, but the whole Tillman bursts in after her, and that's fine. It's the fact that Mulder and Scully then come down the stairs as well, in this case of he hasn't given us any reason to think he would trust you by telling you about this, because this is seemingly unconnected with your investigation.
Aubrey's very small. Maybe they were just staying across the street.
It still feels like an odd title for an episode as well. I mean, I can't suggest you a better one, but the focused
Sister
would be better, yeah. Because it's the whole as episode like Aubrey, and it's the name of the town you did think would encompass the entire town.
I did do some research because I wondered if there was like a mythological reference, if the name Aubrey meant anything.
Yeah.
But as far as I can, its actual literal meaning is something like Elven King, because it is both a boy's and a girl's name. But so on that basis, I don't know why you'd just stick Aubrey and stick the presumably fictitious town of Aubrey in here.
Yeah.
But why that name has escaped my research, I'm afraid.
So we get Mrs. Thibodeau with her really quite horrendous story.
Quite graphic, too.
Quite graphic.
Again, noting back to the content warning for this episode, it's very, very nasty.
Yeah, and as much as it's essential for the plot to go on, it's really kind of a bit messed up for Mulder to push her on the actual rape situation.
This is Mulder.
And it's also odd that she has kept this record of where the child went.
On an emotional level, though, she's given birth to this baby all the same. You can't imagine what the kind of emotional burden for that would be. I can buy keeping this, just in case you might change your mind in the future.
I suppose so. And then he died really young, I think.
Yeah, you certainly know he's died prior to the events of the episode. This being, of course, BJ's father. It was interesting, that generational gap, and they do say the whole thing about these memories skipping a generation, but I was kind of expecting more for her to be like BJ's mother when it came to this reveal.
Yeah, it's a bit odd. It was her father, the cop, and trying to do some dramatic irony there, and it doesn't really work.
Especially as presumably he would have had no idea who his father was.
I mean, I think, okay, possibly the way why this episode is different to the previous ones, like Born Again and Roland specifically, is you don't normally have the other person alive at the same time.
Yeah, I suppose. It's not that she's been possessed with Oakley's spirit.
Yeah, it's just he's been possessed by his personality or his mindset somehow. It's odd that Coakley is still alive.
And her aggressiveness seems to go away the second Oakley dies.
Well, that's the other part,
or at least it breaks the connection enough that Mulder can get to safety.
Yeah, but it's kind of like you contrast that to Roland, where the implication in the episode mostly is that the head has died, and that's why Roland is now free.
Or potentially has been possessed by his brother.
But still, there's that cut-off point of that's when things break, and you expect that from the possessing kind of mindset. Whereas in this one, it's a case of there's not to be any connection between Coakley and BJ, but until he's dead, she can't be free of this malign influence. It's just a bit weird.
It has a weird connection as well with it. The inference is that these genetic markers or whatever they are have remained dormant and been triggered by the fact that BJ's got pregnant.
Yeah.
So it's something to do with the act of getting pregnant, or the hormones or something is what has suddenly triggered these repressed memories.
Yeah, and I think we don't actually dwell on that at all. We just kind of mention it as an offhand thing and head on to the climax.
I guess it's just to explain, because nothing else has changed in the environment, of why she would suddenly flip her crazy switch.
Yes. Activate the evil gene.
Activate the evil gene, that's the better way of putting it, yes.
Riverdale. But then we also get the weird tension things, though, where at no point was Coakley ever meant to be subtle in the past.
No.
But when she comes for Coakley, it's very evasive, cuts the tubes on his oxygen cylinder, and kind of lures him into a place where she can attack him.
We'll go with our differing strategies, because she isn't Coakley. She's inherited Coakley's kind of memories. Evidently, you're going for your whole being a serial killer is presumably a particularly strong memory or emotion or sense of being, which is why it's something that's been passed on. However, she's quite diminutive and Coakley is massive. So you've got your differing strategy because you're a female serial killer, maybe.
We've also maybe realised there's a whole other dark implication the episode doesn't tangle with. So BJ, we assume, has killed, we don't know how many present-day victims, do we?
At least 2.
At least 2. And as much as she is being, Coakley's mindset is doing this, how much does her status as a police officer factor into these?
You've also got the idea as well, is given she's also attacking women, that women tend to be a lot more vulnerable than men, but only towards other women.
Yeah.
So, if you're in a situation where a man approaches you, you're going to behave differently to if a young woman approaches you.
Exactly. We just do not handle this one at all. That's just out the window in terms of things that actually remotely touched upon. Do you have anything else for this episode?
No, I believe we've probably covered all my bases for this one.
Okay.
Next week's episodes will be Irresistible and D-Handed Devalettes. Okay, just for a pre-warning, I will remind you again at the start of next week's episodes, there will be a content warning for next week's 2 episodes as well. Irresistible focuses on a killer who is a necrophiliac, but also particularly targets young women quite violently. The other episode is D-Handed Devalettes, an excellent episode from what I remember, but does have reference to a girl under hypnosis describing what a satanic cult has supposedly done to her, which involves repeated rapes and sacrifices of her babies.
Our theme music is envisioned by Kevin MacLeod. You can find that on incompetech.com, and it's licensed under the Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. If you'd like to get in touch with us, our email address is thingsargettingstrange42@gmail.com.
Alternatively, you can find us on social media. On Twitter and Tumblr, we are at GetStrange42. On Mastodon, we are at GetStrange42 at universitydon.com. And on Facebook, you can find us just by searching for Things Are Getting Strange, an X-Files Rewatch podcast.
Thank you all for listening, and until next week, remember,
Resist or serve.